Hey everyone, this week's Part 2 episode is a continuation of the 2024 Southern California Gang Conference catch-up interviews with previous guests on Game of Crimes. So without wasting any more time, let's bring on today's guests. And our next guest is from episode 108, and that's John Norez, who was a California wildlife officer. John, welcome back on Game of Crimes, brother.
Oh, man, Steve, it's good to be back on, and we finally get to meet in person, because this is the first time we've been face-to-face since doing that episode, because we're all the way across the country, and to do it here at the Southern California Gang Conference, what a treat. Good to see you again.
Absolutely, brother. It's I love coming to this. When the folks here at the conference were asking me who did I think would be good speakers, you immediately came to mind, because I was so impressed with not only what you did, but your book. And we'll give you a shout out on your book here. It's called The Hidden War: How Special Operations Game Wardens Are Reclaiming America's Wildlands from the Drug Cartels. And you folks, if you haven't listened to John's episode, go back and listen to it, please, because it's one that it was kind of like John Mattingly. It really ticked me off about what the Mexican cartels were doing to grow weed, marijuana here in the United States. But the diversion of resources is what really ticked me off.
Yeah. It's kind of eye-opening. People still are shocked to hear that the cartels operating, throughout all of America, and a lot of crimes. Steve, and you said it best on our last podcast when we did that first episode. The polycriminality of the Mexican cartels, now the Chinese cartels, which we can talk about today because some fresh stuff has dropped since we had that first episode. But you think of fentanyl, you think of methamphetamine, you think of human trafficking, gun running. And you hear about the cartels involved in the weed trade, but nobody is really clued in on, or at least more and more people are starting to become clued in on the environmental destruction that goes with their involvement, especially in cannabis, and the banned poisons and these toxic neurotoxins that are being put on these plants and in the soil and in the water and all over the weed that's not getting taken off before it gets to an unsuspecting black market public.
Absolutely. I was trying to look. I've got bookmarks in your book here, but I'm of course when I'm looking for something, I can never find what I'm looking for. But just the one resource that stuck with me was the diversion of water.
Yeah.
How many gallons was that?
It's crazy to think about the amount of water that has been stolen by these cartels doing the weed trade. It's in the billions of gallons in, say, California during our peak drought years, which we just kind of came out of a really, really bad drought throughout California because of two really good back-to-back winters. But prior to that, you're talking 2020 back to 2016. And I mean, California is an example of a drought state, and the whole West is under drought. And of course, this weed is being, grown indoors. It's being grown outdoors. It's on private and public land now. And it doesn't really matter where. It matters where that water is coming from and how depleted that water is. And on average, and this is a very, rough but accurate approximation from the standpoint of how much water does an illegal cannabis plant take? About 5 gallons per plant per day for an outdoor grow.
Wow.
Now you get these legitimate growers that are conserving water, and they're growing, dispensary type cannabis. It's organically pure. It's tested seed to sale. They're going through all the permitting. They're paying all the big money for that. And they're down to using a gallon, maybe 2 gallons of water a day, maybe even less. But of course, cartels don't care about conserving water. And of course, they're taking in from our pristine water sources. We're the headwaters of, not only pristine streams for wildlife, but our drinking water in towns and communities below that. And something that's really come to light, and that since our first conversation, I had the opportunity and the honor of testifying in Congress on just this general issue of how embedded the cartels are on an environmental and public safety front well beyond the southern border. That was in October, and going back just this next week, and we unfortunately have to leave the conference a little early to get to Congress early next week, but talking about tribal land impacts. And in California, we worked with the Hoopa and the Yurok tribes back when, I co-founded and we led the marijuana enforcement team, by the tribal police and the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs folks, going, hey guys, we finally want to start working with some teams. We know we have cartel grows all over our forests, and we're getting to the point like up on the Trinity River, which is the lifeblood for the Hoopa. This is a great example. It's a template for the country. They have a sacred river that supplies their main food source, salmon, ceremonial, and it's their drinking water. I mean, it's literally the water they live off of in their tribal communities. And they were within days of turning on the tap and not having drinking, showering, cleaning water, because so many diversions from the Trinity, Steve, were coming from the Sinaloa cartel-backed grows. And we got involved, and it was really cool. What an honor to collaborate with tribal police, because as a game warden, I know what it's like to be undergunned, undermanned, right, and completely undersupported. And I thought I had it bad, and I'm looking at 2 BIA officers running around for like, three, 4 massive mountainous counties in Northern California, and they can't make a dent. And we went in and found not 10, not 20, but hundreds of historical cartel grows that were either active or maybe they've been dormant for 3, 4, 5, up to 10 years. But all the poisons are still in the ground. Nothing's been reclamated or cleaned up. So all that water is like poisoned constantly. So we're talking to the tune of billions of gallons, to long-windedly answer your question. And then what we call the cumulative effects of if the reclamation and the cleanup doesn't get done, like we talked about in episode 108. That was a very big component that we had to integrate into the marijuana enforcement team, as I talk about in Hidden War, with a lot of other agencies now helping out a lot. DEA is very supportive of the environmental impacts. They're seeing that. They're coming to help us at the federal level, the sheriff's office, Forest Service, national parks. We just can't do it alone. It's got to be a force multiplication. It's got to be a priority that we all deal with. And it's really nice to start seeing that now. But the effects have been devastating, like we're discussing. Well,
and as you're talking, I seem to remember the figure 8 billion gallons. That just blew my mind when I read that. But also for our listeners that haven't read your book yet, these areas that you're going into up in the forest, you don't drive up in your car and get out and walk a few yards, do you?
Right. No, they're pretty remote. They're pretty remote, especially on the tribal lands, the national parks. You get deep into, our national forest, and not only in California, it's in 20, 30 other states, whether it's Chinese or Mexican cartels running the issue. It's coming from different places. But it could be, I've taken an 8 to 10 mile hike, with our team overnight deep into a wilderness area just to get to the point where we could actually get overwatch on a grow before assaulting it the following morning. And those are pretty extreme. Okay. But they're that far back, on average, maybe 2-3 miles back, but it's always no trail. Mm-hmm. It's always up and down. It's always loud. It's always hot. And you got to just kind of grind through it. But yeah, they're remote. Definitely.
Yeah, I remember, I think you get inserted by helicopters, you fast rope down, then you hike, or you go in by mules. And I remember one where I think you guys used kayaks to get up a river.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to use some ingenious methods that are not traditional in law enforcement. The toxins, though, and the fact that this is on Indian land, I'm glad that something's being done there because, for years we've heard about our indigenous population, the American Indians, right, have just been overlooked. You watch movies. I'm thinking of the movie, I think it was Hidden River.
Wind River. Yeah.
I'm looking at your book and said Hidden River, where you see the poverty there and you see the lack of law enforcement and you see the indifference that nobody gives a crap.
Yeah.
So the fact that you guys are getting involved with that. Now, when you say you're going to Congress, what's your purpose of going to Congress?
Basically, for this hearing, specifically, it's to testify my experience on cartel impacts on tribal lands specifically, and having the examples we just talked about with the Hoopa, the Yurok, what we saw to those waterways, what we saw in the historical grows, and how just understaffed they were to even put a dent in that. I'm going to testify to that to show that these impacts to our indigenous nations have been going on for decades. It's not just a new thing. Well, with that, it was cannabis, obviously, and it was illegal grows happening up there, and it was water and poisoning and wildlife loss and things like that. But fast forward to, I now reside in Montana. I'm no longer in California. Spent a lot of time there still because it's my old stomping grounds, and there's a lot of work to be done, like this great conference. So here we are. So still spend quite a bit of time throughout the year in the Golden State where I was born and raised. But my family's been in Montana for 40 years. Granddad was career Navy, from life of service with my dad, uncles and aunts. So settled there. And then all of a sudden we find out that the cartels are now targeting, Sinaloa specifically targeting the Native American indigenous nations in the most remote areas of northwestern Montana for fentanyl, methamphetamine. Oh. And that's in my backyard. So that's become a podcast topic right now with, very irate people, either with, patriotic backgrounds like yours and mine of federal or state service, military, going, man, I mean, Montana is known as the last great place in America that you've got kind of a remote reality if you want to go live a rural life. And that's as far away from the southern border as you can get, is that corner bordering Alberta, Ontario. And how are they going into these tribal nations and dominating the fentanyl market and leaving these communities strung out, addicted, taking their cars, taking their guns, running them back to Mexico, and just working in there because this fentanyl in remote areas like that is $100 a pill, not $5 like it is in San Jose, California, or $5 or $10 in, say, Chicago. It's got so much black market value. The cartels are like, hey, we're going to go up. We're going to hit that area, and we're going to suck these folks dry of their money and their resources. But the worst part about it is because, again, how depleted BIA and tribal nation police officers, tribal police, they're just overwhelmed by it. And they've got, especially in Montana, it's so remote, they're covering territories that are unbelievably large. Like I thought game wardens had it bad, times 10 of what they have to cover. So to think that they're going to make a real effective dent without a lot of help is, unrealistic. And that's something I'm going to talk about in Congress next week specifically, is having had such a great working relationship with the tribal police up at the Hoop on Yurok, knowing that we were kind of helping them take back their communities, and knowing as game wardens, in the early days when we didn't have a marijuana enforcement team, we didn't have a cannabis enforcement program, and nobody that we were going and raiding these things with were taking out any of the debris. They weren't reclaiming the impacts to the wildlands or the waterways. I feel that, deep. I mean, obviously, I became a game warden and not another side of law enforcement just because of my love for wildlife, wildlands, and waterways, and growing up as a hunter and an angler and respecting wildlife and wanting to see it there for future generations and just the healing power of nature in general. But to see what they're doing to these tribal nations, man, is just evil. I mean, all of America is affected, as you and I have talked about, brother. And it's one of these things where I think we all need to team up. Tribal nations, federal, state, local, education, counseling. I mean, this should be a domestic priority, how we're handling these embedded cartels, and treat it like an eco-terrorism war. And every American needs to be aware.
Well, let me ask you, what you've been up on Capitol Hill before, right?
Yes, sir.
And what is the response? Because I've gone up there on a couple of things, and I was so disappointed.
Yeah, my first experience in Congress was only 4 or 5 months ago, last October, and it was actually pretty positive. The committee in general, the chairman that put that committee together, the name of the hearing was Protect Our Borders, Save Our Parks. And what they were trying to get out of that was showing that our national parks, our forests, our federal lands, as a generality, are being impacted throughout the whole country. And this just isn't a border issue, because obviously there's a ton of time being spent the last couple of years on, we got to close the border, we got to protect the border, we got to get border control bills, we need to change the way the administration is addressing what happened with Title 42, all these things on the southern border. My job was to go in and say, you know what, I've never worked the border specifically until after retirement, working with agents down there from an outreach standpoint. Did I operationally work the border? Never. I just dealt with the aftermath of Sinaloa's, finest, running around the Silicon Valley foothills and later the whole state of California. So we needed to show that this is not a border issue now. This is an embedded, every American is at risk. Every indigenous nation is at risk. It doesn't matter where we come from demographically. We got to look at it that way. And that was my job, was to articulate those experiences. And I actually had a very positive experience. I can say a lot of great questions from the committee. You only have so much time to answer questions and so much time to testify. And I ran it right up to the bell to where they had to cut me off, but I got pretty fired up about some of these things. And I know after the official hearing was over, several congressmen, addressed us and gave their gratitude, and we, responded with that same gratitude. But more importantly, they were like, I had no idea it was this embedded. I had no idea it was in the Silicon Valley foothills that you were dealing with this. And I think I had actually post-hearing mentioned the tribal nation issue just because it's becoming such a hot topic. It was just on its infancy then, and now in Congress, this is a huge issue right now. And I think we're going to see this, come November when it comes to the top administrative positions, that this is going to be a massive policy issue because it's affecting people deeply. That, our Native American tribes that have had sacred lands for so long are being impacted in such a bad way.
Yes, it's just briefly, I want to mention, because when you said they had no idea, my old DEA partner, Javier Pena, we connected with a group to go up, and this was before COVID, to talk to Congress about counterfeit medications.
Okay.
So we talked, one time we talked to the House side, the next time we talked to the Senate side. We even went to the American Legislative Exchange Conference here, which has, it's representatives from all 50 states are there for a week-long conference. I'm sorry, not party.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it was. And I was shocked at how many people came up afterwards and said, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you're the people making our laws to keep us safe, and you didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So I don't want to bitch on that too much.
No, but you bring up a great point, brother. If our legislatures aren't clued into the depth of this, and they're shocked at this point when it's something you and I have worked for our careers, and I'm going back 15, 20 years now as a game warden, knowing this is embedded and having so much shock and awe on that congressional committee of a lot of the members that were seeing this for the first time and going, wow, this is a lot closer to my backyard than I thought. What are some solutions? And I think when we talk about tribal land impacts next week, I'm really going to drive that point home in my closing statement, how we need to address this and that everybody's affected. And the other thing that kind of comes out is a lot of people say, well, this cannabis thing, I hear about it, but I'm not a cannabis user. I don't live next to a dispensary. I don't live next to an illegal cartel grow in Humboldt County. Why is this a problem for me? And it's like, well, this weed is poisoned. So you may not see it, but your kids might. You may not take a deadly fentanyl tablet from a dirty lab, but your child might, because we know that 200 Americans a day are dying from this stuff. And it's 70,000, the latest from DEA, actually, my fellow friends in the DEA that are looking at this right now, 70,000 a year of Americans are dying from fentanyl, and they're in that young age bracket, that teenager to 40. You look at that, and I think about the losses of the whole Vietnam conflict, 8 to 10 years at 50 some odd thousand, and we're losing more Americans to fentanyl, brother, than we are to conflicts abroad.
Right.
And I'm preaching to the choir on that for sure, but that breaks my heart. So we're all affected,
Absolutely.
And I think that what people don't realize is the same cartel operatives that we're fighting in the weed fields or on private land are just another, division of the same group that is trafficking humans, that are in the child sex trafficking trade, right? Polycriminals, you said it. I got that term from you, actually. I like that.
Whoa, that's scary.
In fact, you might even see it in testimony next week. So, but polycriminals is what we got to look at. So everybody's affected. And now it doesn't get any deeper and more historical than our tribal nations getting hit. So I'm glad to see this being addressed. And so for that reason, excited to go back. I don't know if I'm optimistic, neutral on what will happen, what won't happen. I think we need to see what happens in November. Talking to a lot of fellow friends here at the conference, and I try to stay as non-political as I can. You and I come from the service background. We just want what's good for our nation, and we want our people to be safe. And let's keep people safe. But I think we're gonna have to make some changes to do that.
Well, so Game of Crimes, we have a Patreon channel also, which is a subscriber channel, and that's where I'll get a little more political. And Morgan, when he was still at the show, we did also. But I'm going to do a special here very soon discussing about the legalization of marijuana. And I'm not looking to ask you a political question,
sure,
but I do want your personal opinion, because
Absolutely.
You have as much, if not more, experience than almost anybody I know when it comes to Mexican-grown weed in the United States.
Right.
So in Florida, I live in Florida now, and on the ballot this year is legalization of weed.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, based on all your experience and knowledge, and you are much smarter in all this, you're much more educated, much more experienced in this than I am. If we legalize marijuana in the United States, is that going to stop the Mexican marijuana problem we have in the United States?
I don't think it'll stop it, but I think if it's regulated correctly, it will drastically be reduced. But when I say regulated correctly, you got to make it available. You got to make it at a price point like alcohol or tobacco. Mm-hmm. I look at the wine industry, tobacco, how BATF works. When you look at it nationally, and I know we just descheduled from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, or it's in the process. That recently happened just a couple of weeks ago, actually. I think it was a step in the right direction. There's 43 approximate million American cannabis repetitive users in America. We're not going to stop cannabis use by, overregulating and underregulating. And I know when we're regulating state by state by state, we're just not getting it right, sadly. California could have been a great example, being the weed state of the world with the Mediterranean climate I come from, where we're sitting today. And we went for profit, we went for taxes, we went for all kinds of different agendas, and we watered down, as we talked about in the first episode, felony outdoor growing, i.e. the cartels, to misdemeanors and infractions for juveniles. So they got incentivized, and it got worse once regulation started. And then you're seeing these handful of what I call the tier one true growers that are doing it by the numbers. Regardless of what I think on cannabis is irrelevant. What are they doing out there trying to do it right? No pesticides, seed to sale. They're paying all their fees. They're going to legal dispensaries, whatever they're doing that the law allows in that particular state. And 90% of those folks are gone. They're leaving the industry because it's so corrupt. They're leaving the industry because the black market is out producing and basically just running them under the ground because of poor laws. So long-windedly, yes, but it would have to be structured far different than we're doing now. And this state by state by state by state regulation structure so far in every state hasn't worked. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Florida being I think Florida's a wired right state as a whole, kind of like Montana. You're in a great state for sure, brother. But Michigan, we just did a whole block with Michigan State Police. They have a cannabis enforcement thing with their state patrol. And they just watered it down to a misdemeanor. It's almost, they mimicked exactly what California did. And they've got the Mexican element, but they've got the Asian contingent mostly. And they are underwater. They're barely making a dent. So no, we have to do it differently for sure if we're going to do it at all.
Yeah, and the reson I asked that is they were putting out commercials in Florida now.
Oh, geez.
And I can't remember the name of the organization that's doing it. But they're saying it's going to bring billions with a B, billions of tax dollars in to support our school system and law enforcement.
Yeah.
Even the social media or the television media in Orlando questioned that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be skeptical. I know. Very much so. We had a lot of those same promises with Prop 64 in California. And yeah, law enforcement got some money. Our Met teams have money to operate and they have equipment, but all this education in schools and all this money, it did not make it where it was supposed to go. And we're 8 years in California as a bad example, and it's just gotten worse. So I'd be skeptical, and I'm sure you are too, of what Florida may or may not be doing.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm a little surprised it's even on the ballot down there, but whatever. I guess you can put anything on a ballot. So when you're talking to congressmen or Congress, are there certain politicians that are supporting you that bring you in?
Yeah.
Do you want to give them a shout out?
I really do. I really would. There is a congressman down on the Arizona-Mexico border named Paul Gosar. And he actually met me at Safari Club International, the annual Hunters Convention. It's moved from Reno and/or Las Vegas to Nashville, Tennessee. And I do an annual seminar ever since my first book came out in 2010, War in the Woods, on these updates, how they affect conservationists especially. And he and his aide actually sat through one of my seminars. I had no idea who they were.
Yeah.
And usually I'll get an aide sit in, but I won't get an actual senator or congressman. And then I'll get an aide sit in and go, oh my gosh, this is mind blowing. I got to tell the congressman or congresswoman or my senator, would you come testify to this? We got to know this. This is affecting so much. Absolutely. And I give a book and I give the card and I'm just waiting. I'll do whatever I can, to shut this stuff down. And you never hear anything. Well, Congressman Gosar sat through that with Rory for the whole hour. And when he came up to me at the end of the seminar, I could see it in his eyes. He was fired up. And he just looked at me and said, Lieutenant Norris, I'm going to put a committee together. I want a hearing. I'd really like it if you'd come testify. And I was like, Congressman, sure. Put it together. And that was February last year. And come about October, I finally got that call. And he was the head of that particular hearing. He was the chairman, even though there was a Democratic congressman that was overall for the Natural Resources Committee, which he oversees. Congressman Gosar was bringing that hearing to light as the chairman. So I felt like I at least had somebody that was really supportive of what I was going to say, and that kind of lessened the blow of what to expect. I've never testified in Congress. Mm-hmm. And Murph, it's like we've done a lot of speaking in our jobs operationally, and, you're doing amazing stuff on the outreach front. I'm trying to do my part, but it's a different game.
Very much.
When you're the first time in congressional hearings, and I've seen them on C-SPAN. I remember all the Ollie North on testimony and all these other crazy things that came up when I was growing up in the 80s. I'm like, oh my gosh, is that going to be me? I better not say the wrong thing, man. I might not make it home. But it went really, really well. And ironically, the questions that came back were nothing but positive. Oh. They embedded deeper, and they came from other congressmen that were, I think, aligned similarly to how I would stand politically, or definitely how Congressman Gosar would. But they just were like, wait a minute, you said this, what about this? Mm-hmm. And I went, well, and I went till the bell, and then I had to stop, and then we got to talk once it was done and go in deeper. And that definitely catalyzed what's going to happen in tribal nation stuff, because that was one of the topics. So I get to go a little deeper. So I think it fell on some good ears. I don't know how much difference it's going to make, but I know a ton of border control bills popped up after that. I was asked to go 2 months ago, and I was already, on a committed speaking engagement training for Michigan State Police that same day, or I would have been in Washington. There was just no way. So they're taking notice. They're taking notice of things you and I have fought for, and realizing it's not just an illegal drug issue. It goes so much deeper than what, you were fighting in the DEA and what I'm fighting on the wildlife side. They're very synonymous, and they've gotten more pressing since we pulled the plug on operationals.
Well, it's encouraging to hear you say they were receptive to your message, because it seems like when you watch, a good friend of mine, retired DEA agent Derek Maltz, is kind of leading the charge about the voices of fentanyl, all the poisonings that are going on and everything. And he was testifying in front of Congress, and one congressman towards the end made a snide remark.
Yeah.
And you got to know Derek, because he's from Long Island. He don't back down from anybody. And he made a remark back. He did it respectfully, but forcefully. And then all of a sudden they're wanting to, what did he just say? You can't talk. I'm a congressman. Well, why the hell can you talk to me like that, but
Absolutely.
I can't talk to you like that?
Absolutely. And to that point, I will say one thing from that first hearing is that chairman, I won't mention the name, told one of the panelists that went on just before me, and she was an immigration attorney with expertise on impacts when immigration floods a border. You're going to have an impact. You're going to have an impact to land. You're going to have an impact to safety. You're going to have an impact to landowners on the other side, tribal nations. There was a chief that spoke right next to after her before I finished up the panel of five witnesses that had these cartels going onto burial grounds and decimating them, and not even cartel, but just flooded border folks coming across, being trafficked, all in the last couple of years with the change in policy. So that kind of certainly catalyzed where we're going next. But I remember she spoke very honestly about this, and she was called a racist and insulted directly after her opening testimony. And she was wonderfully calm. And I like her response. She just kind of breathed back. And I remember Congressman Gosar looked at this chairman and said, "That is absolutely disgusting that you would say something like that."
Good.
And then you look at the fact that even came out of someone's mouth, and that's our leaders, and a mutual friend of ours, very vetted in undercover operations, which I won't mention names, that I got to meet today because of you, had the same talk. We were just talking, exchanging books. And he's like, "I went to Congress once, and they're leading our country. Did you see the infighting? They're like children." And he said, "Was yours like that?" He asked the same question. And Steve, I had to go, "Yeah, well, we had one incident of that." But I like the fact that the chairman that brought me in addressed it and shut it down. And she came back with a great answer. She goes, "Congressman, I'm a Jewish immigrant by descent, so I don't think I'm racist."
Good.
And she was wired right. So it put that one to bed. But those comments just, you wouldn't think they'd come out of our leaders, and they shouldn't come out of anybody if we're trying to solve a problem. And overall, though, it was a positive experience, and I'm crossing my fingers for a good one next week.
Excellent. We're standing behind you 100%. We look forward to hearing, we hope it goes well. Results, I'm sure, will be far down the road, but you know what? You got to address it at every opportunity you get, because if you don't, nothing's going to happen.
I mean, what do they say? Squeaky wheel gets the grease. And
exactly.
Just keep pushing. The way you and I met, and I can't thank you enough, brother, for helping perpetuate the message, especially from being such an authority on it, of what you accomplished, of taking down one of the biggest kingpins, and more importantly, the aftermath that man left in the organization that we're still feeling the effects of in our country, all over the world. And I think that's what the American people really need to remember, is we have short memories. And hopefully we're learning from some of our history, the case you had, some of the operations I had in just the state of California alone. I don't think we can ever forget that, because they will repeat themselves, and they're going to repeat themselves worse, as we've seen.
Well, I'll keep pushing you as a speaker. Javier and I have a lot of contacts, and this is our 9th year of speaking, primarily around the United States, but around the world. This is a topic that I think it's very current now. Not that it wasn't before, but I think it's more popular now, especially with legalization. And I just got to say, I love the flag on your shirt, because we wear thin blue lines. He's got a thin green line,
yes, sir,
on his American flag. That's cool.
Yeah, the game wardens are they're in that little thin green line groove, right? With Border Patrol, with Rangers, and with military. But with game wardens, and again, my heart goes out to tribal police, like we just said, because we've always worked with 2 out of 10 people you need for an operation, that we didn't have a good patrol equipment in the early days. Game wardens were not necessarily perceived as, are they legitimate cops? Are they, bird and bunny, checking fishing licenses, telling stories? And it's like, game wardens do a lot of cool stuff, and it's really cool to see people noticing what game wardens are doing. And that's what we're going to talk about today here at this. So I appreciate you noticing.
No, brother, it's, so just so our listeners know, John is going to be the next speaker up here. He's got about 20 minutes before he goes on stage in front of almost 1,000 Southern California law enforcement professionals. Nothing like making you nervous right before you go on stage, right?
Not at all. Here we go.
But this is, let me tell you, I promise you're amongst friends here. This is a very receptive audience. And I'll be honest with you, until I read your book, I didn't know how involved wildlife officers were. I thought the same thing, that'd be a cool job to have because you're all, where they're going to stock the streams. You can go fishing there and catch fish and that kind of thing. But brother, keep fighting the fight. We will support you 110%, everybody. If you go back and look at episode 108, go back on our book list on the Game of Crime website. You'll see where his book is. But again, it's Hidden War, How Special Operations Game Wardens Are Reclaiming America's Wildlands from the Drug Cartels. Highly, highly recommend this. Support John and his efforts. We will. Brother, thank you so much for coming back on.
Great to be on, Steve. Good to see you. Thanks.
All right, God bless. And next is Mr. Mike Collazo from episode 127 back in December of 2023. And as you remember, Mike was one of the officers from Nashville Police Department that responded to the Covenant school shooting in which several children were killed. And I know you have. Everybody's seen the videos of these guys responding. And it's so different than what you've seen in other places like Uvalde. And I'm not here to talk about Uvalde and what happened there. But what I will say is what we saw that day, and the videos back this up, is we saw what police officers are trained to do, how they're trained to respond. I don't know a single police officer that got on the job here with the idea that, hey, I want to go get shot today. So, but that's part of the job. Is it scary? It's scarier than hell. Are you nervous? You are, but you have to be able to control your fears, or else your fear will take the best of you and nothing happens and innocent people are killed. So, all right, Mike, welcome back to the show, brother.
And thanks for having me.
Yeah, he's sitting there looking at me like, when the hell are you going to shut up so I can talk?
Yeah, said that.
And the listeners are probably wondering that too. So good to see you again out here. We got to meet you and your partner last year. And if you remember when we did Mike's interview, his partner didn't show up because he got married. I mean, he was on his honeymoon. Good Lord. He gave up being on Game of Crimes to go on a honeymoon. What's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, now he's back in school. Oh. So that's why he's not here today.
At school as in police training or college?
Police training.
Yeah. Very good. Well, still, you guys were a team and you did a hell of a job out there.
I appreciate it.
I'm not sure where the investigation has gone since we talked to you in December. Can you update us a little bit?
Yeah. So, probably about a month before the year anniversary, we ended up getting a letter from the DA's office clearing us. Mm-hmm. So criminally, we were cleared. Immediately after that, within about a week or two, we ended up getting a letter from our Office of Professional Accountability, who investigated the officer-involved shooting aspect for the department. They ended up sending us a letter clearing us as well. And actually, just last week, we did a shooting review board that our department holds as well, just to go through the whole process or the whole shooting, talk about it, do a presentation on it, and then we give our story, and then they'll determine if everything as well that occurred on that day was within policy or if it was intentional, which I didn't really understand the intentional part until I talked to my lawyer afterwards, who was present for it, and we were cleared on that administrative review board as well. So in all, everything's wrapped up.
I understand everything you're talking about. I'm thinking that our listeners are thinking, what? You had to go before a grand jury? Your case was presented to a grand jury that, that all these shooting review boards and these other organizations, when clearly the videos, my hat's off to the chief at Nashville for getting those videos out to the public, because that just cleared it up immediately. Everybody saw what happened.
Yeah. I mean, that's another topic to even talk about if you wanted to, how they handled that. I know our public relations personnel very well. Don Aaron, he's now going to be a family friend for the rest of our lives. And
Nice.
the things that he did, I commend him on. Putting certain information out at certain times, making sure the facts were correct before releasing things, making sure from my understanding, even with typing a sentence to post on a social media platform to push information out, he's running it through 5 other people before they post it.
Wow.
So they put a lot of time and effort into combining whatever information to make sure the correct information's going out, instead of what in some cases we always see, footage gets put out or a snippet gets put out or the wrong message or tweets put out, and then it just goes rampant from there. And now we're backtracking, trying to put the right information out, and people have already made up their mind.
Yeah.
In our case, they were very methodical in what they did, and it showed.
It was as professional as anything I've seen. And our longtime listeners know that I grew up in Murfreesboro, which is the county south of Davidson County where Nashville is. So Mike and I are probably related. We just don't know it. You know, it's those family trees with no branches type thing. Yeah. But I swear, and I remember when we did your uniform, we talked about the positive response and the way that Nashville executive management handled it. We were very impressed with it then, and now still impressed with it now. And this is a normal thing that when police are involved in a shooting, that it does go before a grand jury. That's not something special in this case. Back in 1989, when my partner was shot and our informant was killed down in Miami, Janet Reno was the district attorney for Dade County, Florida at that time, and our case had to go before a grand jury there. And, you know, when you're the person involved in that shooting and they say they're going to a grand jury, you're like, I'm not the bad guy here. But what it is, it's an overabundance of caution to show the public that the police officers did exactly what they were supposed to do, because we are public servants. We serve the public. It's right there in the title. It's not any more complicated than that. So I love the fact that it sucks when you're on the receiving end of that, but when you're cleared, it just gives you a little measure of reassurance, right?
Yeah, and a lot of stress just goes away.
Yeah.
In the back of your mind, you're always thinking that. I mean, were there, nights that I couldn't sleep or had a nightmare of somebody showing up at our houses, arresting all of us for the incident? 100%.
Oh.
Those are things that happen involving officer-involved shootings or critical incidents in general. That thought is always there.
Wow.
It's always tough, but at the same time, like I said, I mean, we knew we did what we were trained to do. We knew we were in the right, but your mind still does things. You have to seek help when you need it. And, we all got our help. I know we talked a little bit about that, the mental health aspect of everything. It it helps you out a whole lot. So once you get those letters and you get cleared on things, it goes a long way. It's very impactful to get that letter.
It is. And excuse me. I remember I got kind of upset with the district attorney's office in Dade County, Florida, when they investigated that. But I guess a lot of it was immaterial on my part, or when it involves you, you're just a little more sensitive to things like that. So just so glad that that's all worked out. Just, again, take our hats off to the Nashville Police Department from the chief on down. That's what I call true leadership.
And you brought up another good point, the unknown.
Yeah.
We had never gone through this before. This was the first time myself and Officer Rex had fired our service weapons. First time all 5 of us, Sergeant Mathis, Detective Cagle, Detective Policey, were involved in a critical incident.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of unknowns. So just going through step by step, our chain of command was there with us. Our peer supports were there with us, our FOP representation, our lawyers is trying to feed information to us to keep us going and letting us know what's next. So we kind of knew the processes. We knew they were going to take a while. I mean, like I said, it took 11 months, 11 months to get paperwork telling us that we were cleared. It's a process.
That's a long time too.
And it's a very detailed process. They don't want to make the wrong decision on anything. They don't want to rush any decisions. Mm-hmm. That's what we all sit back and we watch these things on social media where somebody can watch a 5-second clip on somebody's post and automatically make a decision, say this person's guilty. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
We need to take our time. We need to investigate it. And that that plays into some of these oversight boards that are coming in play and things like that. Like there's processes already put in place, state law, There's legislation covering certain things. Like, let things pan out the way they're supposed to pan out, or be investigated the way they're supposed to be investigated. Let the system do its job.
And what I see here too, the way Nashville handled it, is you're maintaining the public trust.
Yes.
That there's absolutely no attempt at whatsoever to cover anything up. This is what happened. Here's the proof. We're going to still check it.
I can tell you, I mean, there was that big push to a couple of years prior to our incident with body cams. You know, a lot of the officers I work with were perfectly fine with body cams. We're like, hey, bring them. We want them. Yeah. Because these body cams are going to show the public the things that we do right, the things that we are every day showing up to work. Hey, this individual's basically lying to our investigators, saying that I stole their money or that I unlawfully stopped them for whatever reason. Look at the body cam footage. It's going to show the truth.
You know, I remember as a young DEA agent in Miami, I'd already been a police officer for 12 years before I became a Fed. And I was working with an assistant U.S. attorney in Miami, and he said one day about video, audio evidence. And I said, well, we've got agent testimony. He said, look, let's get this straight right now. The best evidence is video. Second best is audio. Third best is agent testimony. You know, and I mean, I was Mr. Macho back then, you know. I thought, hell, there's nobody going to question me. And I got a little upset with him. We had a discussion, but you stop thinking about it, it's true. The video tells you everything that happened right there.
Then throw, like you said, the audio, and then you throw in the testimony. We have to also remember, our department does a great job on this. Do not let your body cam or let your video tell your story. It's going to show a 270-degree angle, whatever angle it is, of what is occurring. However, at the end of the day, what you see is what matters as well. So in our incident, we didn't watch our body cam before we went and interviewed with our homicide detectives and our OPA. They wanted our interpretation of what happened. Then after we spoke and we gave a statement, then we watched our body cam. They wanted raw, this is what happened. Here's what I perceived to happen. And then we watched the body cam, like, hey, I remember that now. There were certain things that just you didn't comprehend because your brain, what I think is your brain's protecting itself. You're just involved in something. It's doing what it can to help you. And when you watch the body cam, it started to fill in some of those holes. And that I didn't understand that until this incident and why it made sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And honestly, I'd never thought of that. But, you know, when I was in uniform, they did body cams. What the heck is that? We didn't have cell phones back then.
That's what the DUI officers get.
Exactly. Now, how many years you got on the job now?
So I hit my 10-year mark.
10 years. Excellent, man. And since that time, you mentioned that you're speaking to groups, or maybe you and I talked about that privately. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I've actually done a handful of speaking events already. I just got done speaking here in California at the gang conference with Mel and them. After everything happened, Mel has been, I'd say, probably at least once a month. I know he's in California, I'm in Tennessee. It's pretty far, but at least once a month, Mel and I talk. So when the opportunity came about to speak here at the conference, I jumped on it because I was like, Mel, everything y'all have done for me, I've got to pay you back somehow. So came out here, spoke, did 2 breakout sessions here just for about 2 hours of just talking about the day, telling the story about all the officers, the paramedics that responded, talk about Mary Craig and Matt Sullivan, the 2 administrative staffs, kind of like what we did, where we just break down everything. But I try to tell everybody's story, kind of do a walkthrough of the day, and then kind of talk about some of the stuff up the after effects that we went through all the way up till here recently when we got our letters. But just go out and talk about that. Seems to get a good response from folks. Kind of other agencies want to kind of know about our training. They want to know some of the things we did proactively beforehand. So we just talk. I mean, I can let everybody know I'm not a public speaker. A professional speaker. I am just your average Joe Smo officer that responded to one of the worst days that we could ever imagine. And here's our story.
Yeah. Responded appropriately, let's say. And I've noticed here, so at the Southern California Gang Conference, this year's roughly 1,000 police officers from the southern part of California out here. It's one of the most exciting things I get to do every year. I'm just thankful to Mel and Santi for inviting me back out every year. But I noticed that, we just came off a lunch break here, and we're trying to make our way over to the venue that we're in is nice enough to give us a little room where we can do the podcast. And obviously you can hear noise in the background because there's 1,000 cops here. Cops are not quiet with each other. But getting from the auditorium to this room took a while because people are stopping you, asking questions. And that's fantastic. That shows you that they listen to your story, they're interested, and they want to learn. Again, I mentioned that no police officer I ever met wanted to get shot in the line of duty, and I haven't met a single police officer yet that wanted to kill somebody in the line of duty. So it's something that's on everybody's mind. We see the anti-police rhetoric going on now. It's more likely. It seems like, I don't know, our society's just gotten so permissive. Things are crazy out there right now. But what are some future plans you have for the police department? Are you going to hang in there for a while, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm sticking it out. I got, at least 10 more years on the department until I could even think about retiring. But I'm having fun still. I enjoy coming to work. I enjoy all the people I work with. I've now been moved over to our high-intensity drug task force with TBI, us, DEA, and some of the surrounding counties, and some of their officers have joined in with our task force. So primarily we were out here focusing on overdoses that have been occurring in our jurisdiction and the surrounding ones, and primarily focusing on that. So, I mean, every day is just a new day and a fun day.
And just to clarify, TBI is not traumatic brain injury, is it?
No, it's Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
And I mentioned that because we just had Jenna Griffith on.
Oh, okay.
And she talked about that. So
okay.
And she was saying it's not Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
That's funny. I like to segue between the two.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, but also, I mean, outside of the department, I am trying to work with other companies, partnering with whoever I can, just trying to talk about that day and mental health and pushing that and just trying to get officers help if they need. I have a really good buddy, Zach. He runs a social media platform called Veteran with a Sign, and his big push is mental health and suicide prevention for the military. So he lives in Nashville. Him and I have kind of been working hand in hand with each other and trying to push that out also to first responders. So like Axon's a big company.
Very big.
Yes. Went to their conference, spoke about mental health at their conference in Miami about 2-3 weeks ago, and kind of working with them, which I didn't know this until speaking with them. They have a new program they're starting called Axon Aid. In that program, if you have any Axon product, from your body cam to a taser, doesn't matter what it is. If you have one of their products, your department is automatically enrolled into their mental health program. So
wow,
you can have a small agency, and they don't have a mental health program. They don't have past support or peer support, and an officer needs help. You can contact Axon Aid, and they'll help you free of charge.
Whoa, that is that, and Axon, AXON is how you spell that company name. Javi and I were out in Lake Tahoe here recently talking to a FBI National Academy Associates Conference, and they were the biggest. They had the biggest booth there.
Yeah, they got a lot of touch, a lot of resources.
That's fantastic. You know, and speaking of, it just now hit me. Jenna Griffith actually lives in Franklin, in Davidson County, Tennessee, this part of Nashville. And she has started a group. There's a nonprofit called Aerial Recovery there.
Okay.
And so they help veterans and first responders suffering from PTSD. They respond to natural and man-made disasters, like all the tornadoes that's been going on in Oklahoma and so forth. And they also work to recover victims of human trafficking in other countries. I mean, these guys, her husband, Seth, we had him on the show also, and he'd been over Ukraine. He'd been in Afghanistan. He was 20-year Air Force combat controller. You know, he's out there. He's the guy telling them, "Oh, I need you to drop bombs like within a few hundred yards of me."
Yeah, where I'm sitting.
Yeah, I think we need to get him some help too.
As you can.
Exactly. So, you know, it might be a good mesh there, because Jenna has started a thing to work with what I call the unsung heroes. And that's, you heard John and I talking about that earlier, about, you know, we want to make sure our first responders, our heroes in blue, are getting the help they need after a traumatic event, but our families need it as well.
Yes.
So, and that's what she's focusing on. So I may have to introduce you to, if you're up for it.
I'm always willing to talk with anybody.
She's a very nice lady.
There's never not enough resources for us.
Absolutely.
So
That is so encouraging to hear, man. You were taking it to the next step. Did somebody suggest that to you, or you just did that on your own?
I mean, I had a lot of help when I was going through some things, especially with family as well, going through stuff, and people just reached out, and you want to continue that. Mm-hmm. Big thing that I do in the presentation, I started off with the story from when I went through an undercover class, and an individual that taught actually had gone through a lot, and he had received some help, and he wanted to continue that. And he was a big thing for him was he gave his personal number out. He said, I don't care if it's 2 a.m. or if it's 8 p.m. If you need me because you were just involved in something, or you just realized, hey, I've got a drinking problem, or hey, I take a lot of opiates and I need help. Mm-hmm. I've hit rock bottom. He goes, I don't care what time it is. You call me, I'm coming. And he had resources in play, companies that were willing to support him to where they would fund his car rental, his plane ride, whatever it was, to get to wherever he needed to get to that person.
Wow.
And his thing was too, he's like, hey, I can't fix your brain, but I can get you to somebody that can.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to stay with you until I get you there. And that stuck. And when our incident happened, he was one of the first phone calls I made. Of course, I called my wife. Of course, I called my family. But when things started to when things started to unfold, I reached out to him and said, hey, man, I need some help. And he's like, hey, I'm on my way. Jumped in the car, drove all the way to Nashville. The next morning, he was at my house. We sat and talked. My wife was there. We went to his hotel, talked for a couple hours. He's constantly checking in and everything. We talk a lot. And I actually asked him, hey, what you did for me, can I continue that? So, wow. 100%. Well, that's what kind of started it. So we're working on that.
Wow.
So
that, that's a hero in his own right that's willing to sacrifice his personal time and whatever funding it costs. Mm-hmm. And he's not even getting a second thought. I'll be there. Oh man, what a support. Is he somebody we can give a plug to or no?
I don't want to oust him just like that without really talking to him, because his is very, I don't want to say sentimental, but his is very,
emotional.
Yeah, you can say emotional, but also, very, hey, if you come to his class, you'll understand.
Mm-hmm. Well, just, so glad that those resources are out there. So glad that law enforcement is realizing now that there is benefit to going to counseling.
Yeah.
It's
that stigma's gone.
Yeah. Well, it's, I'm one of those idiots that came up under that stigma. And we wouldn't talk to the EAP representative because you knew he was going to your boss and tell on you. There's some silliness that was going on back then. But, law enforcement, we don't like change too much either. So.
We're changing in a good way.
Absolutely.
We're changing in the right direction.
I want to ask you too, based on the notoriety of the incident and everything, I mean, it was national news for days afterwards, and you guys set a new standard, or you just showed what the standard should be to respond to those type of situations. Are you seeing any AIM status from that, like either locally or in your own department?
No, I'm just another officer. Yeah, all of us are. I mean, things happened just after local sports teams wanting to do things, which was great. Mm-hmm. It was a way of healing a lot with the kids as well. Nashville Predators did a lot. The Tennessee Titans, they had us all come out, jerseys, things like that, let kids go out on the field. Vanderbilt had when they played Tennessee, they ended up doing an event for the kids as well, invited all of us. So things like that.
Wow.
I see those as fun events.
Yeah.
We get to hang out with the kids too, but they want to put you on the pedestal. I get that. And that's a way that they feel like they're giving back. But man, fast forward now to almost 13 months post the event, I can go to a Walmart. We can go somewhere. Now, don't get me wrong, if some high school friend that I haven't talked to in a year sees me, they're going to be like, hey, it's Collazo, and they're going to run up and say hi. I get that. But I'm just a face in the crowd.
Excellent.
Just like everyone else.
Excellent. Well, and that's so encouraging to hear too, that the local groups in Middle Tennessee are showing their support for law enforcement, because we're not seeing that everywhere else in the United States. One last question: any negative things come out of this? No officers coming up going, "Oh, you think you're hot shit?"
I mean, no.
Good.
In regards to a negative, I guess, we've had a couple of officers have to leave the department on their own because they knew they needed to go. Mm-hmm. Not in a bad way, but they knew, hey, they had gone through some things because of the incident. They had sought help. They knew they were getting the help, but they weren't going to be the same. Mm-hmm. So I guess that could be some type of negative event or a negative thing from that event.
Well, hopefully they really, this job's not made for everybody.
No, and it's not that. Don't get me wrong. It's not the, hey, I can't be a cop. I didn't hit the level I wanted to be, or I wasn't where I needed to be on that. It was more of they got self-awareness. Mm-hmm. They caught themselves as like, hey, I'm not who I was before this event. Mm-hmm. I need to continue getting help, and I don't need to be in this position.
Well,
and I can respect it.
Absolutely. God bless them, because you don't know what that could lead to.
No, you don't.
The last thing you want is somebody committing suicide because they didn't get help. So mm-hmm. I think they're making the right decisions, and that's good to hear that they had the foresight to realize something's got to change here. So before I let you go here, any last thoughts you want to share with us?
No, I'm just ready to go enjoy this conference some more.
Yeah, we got John Norris, who I just interviewed before lunch, or during lunch, actually, right before he got to speak. He's up talking now. Yeah. So excellent people. So Mike, again, brother, you still a hero in my eyes. Thank you for your service to the Middle Tennessee and the citizens of Davidson County. If there's anything we can ever do, you know how to get a hold of me, brother.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you for having me back.
Maybe we'll see you next year.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mike. I hope you now see why I said during the intro that these Southern California Gang Conference update interviews, they are so special for me. The four heroes we just heard from, man, they continue to maintain that hero status in my mind. So here's a quick recap. We got John Mattingly, a man who was just out doing his job, a job he loved, helping others and trying to make Louisville a safer place. At the last minute, he was called on to participate in a search warrant. He didn't complain. Been working long hours. He didn't try to lie his way out of it. He accepted the assignment just like a professional does. And when he initiated the search warrant, all hell broke loose, didn't it? He was shot in the leg and almost lost his life. As John has said time and time again, Breonna Taylor's death, that was a tragedy, and it certainly should have never happened. Her lying boyfriend was the cause behind her death, as well as the wounding of John Mattingly. Afterwards, the boyfriend, he continued to lie to protect himself. If you remember, he said he held her, but there wasn't a drop of blood on him. And because of those lies, mixed in with people and groups whose goal is to cause strife and chaos in our world, all of a sudden the police become the bad guys, which is nothing more than a perpetuation of these lies. The next thing you know, well-known people, boy, they jump on the bandwagon and they begin spewing these lies without knowing they were even lying. I'm not giving them an out here. They're still responsible for the public announcements they made against the police. Why would you ever come out and say things like that? These are the same people who were blessed with a talent to become professional actors, actresses, singers, sports figures, talk show hosts, public figures, people who have huge followings, especially on social media. And without checking any of the facts or doing any research, they accepted what others were saying. And they vilified these police officers, these heroes. And yes, this included some politicians at the local, county, state, and federal levels. Out frickin' rageous. Was this what they thought they would, is this where they thought they would earn more votes by going along with what certain people were saying in the next elections? How irresponsible can they be? Because of the collective actions of all these people, John and his family were targeted with threats of violence. Now, somebody tell me what John's family had to do with any of this. Please tell me that. As bad as all of this was and continues to be, John maintained his professionalism, his faith, and the man is still out trying to help others. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I would have that same reaction if I was in John's shoes. But he sure is setting the standard for the rest of us to follow, isn't he? And then we got Mr. Mike Collazo. He was involved with a horrible situation during which innocent children and adults were murdered at that school. Mike, his partner Rex, and other Nashville police officers, they responded as quickly as they could to a shooting in progress. They took immediate, decisive action. They neutralized the shooter, and they saved who knows how many other lives. Now, if you recall, this was a highly publicized case which threw John and the other officers in the nation's spotlight. And that's a place where most law enforcement professionals are not comfortable. And even though these heroes performed bravely with little concern for their own safety, they still fell under the microscope of the department's Internal Affairs Division, a shooting review board, and their actions were presented to a grand jury for review and possible indictment, all for simply doing their jobs. I mean, think about that. Imagine the stress from something like that. How much stress would that cause you, stress and anxiety on you and your family? But as we all know now, their actions were professional, they were necessary, and they saved lives that day. But here again, this is something that might cause some, if not many, to become bitter, to think that no one really cares about the good guys. That sure seems to be the sentiment out there. I see a lot of social posts where you folks are putting out that you're supporting law enforcement, and thank you for doing that. Please continue to do so. Oh, this can lead, all of that can lead to confusion, anxiety, stress, PTSD, and they might decide to self-medicate with alcohol, narcotics, even suicide. But did you hear what Mike's doing? He's not only continuing with his career in law enforcement, but he's always working to help others who may be suffering from the same things he experienced. He's not sitting back and doing nothing. He's still stepping up to the plate and swinging for those home runs. Man, you got to respect somebody like that. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the chief, the executive staff, and the public affairs unit of the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department. Their handling of this entire situation showed professionalism, it demonstrated accountability to the public, and it saved those involved unneeded scrutiny and grief. And I take my hat off to you folks. I'd gladly work for you anytime. Now, next up was John Norez, retired lieutenant with the California Wildlife Agency. From John's initial interview, we learned about the dangers of illegal marijuana grows in the wilds of California mountains, all being run by who? Illegals coming from Mexico who work for the Mexican drug cartels. We know that. The destruction of poisoning of the lands where these grows are located, the diversion of natural resources, and especially badly needed water during multi-year statewide drought, the lack of concern or care by these criminals, and the complacency, this is important, the complacency and ill-fated actions of the California state legislature all created a ridiculous atmosphere of confusion and ambivalence for law enforcement and those trying to grow weed legally. Now, there's something you probably won't ever hear me say very often, is that I'm pointing out those who are trying to grow marijuana legally. But it's the truth. And when John retired, he could have been upset with the way things went, but he didn't give up his efforts, did he, to support law enforcement? He continued on the speaking circuit, and he worked with the state legislature to bring education and bring awareness to their blunders. And as we found out today, John has discovered that the Mexican cartels, who are they taking advantage of now? Well, they're taking advantage of the people living on tribal lands, especially up in Montana. So what is John doing? Well, he's back on Capitol Hill in Washington, working with the Committee on Natural Resources and the Bureau of Indian Affairs to, again, bring awareness to these issues and find acceptable solutions to provide protection for these people. Now, make no mistake about it, the Mexican cartels supported by the Chinese criminals are doing everything they can to bring death and destruction to our country. We all see it daily in the media, how many people are trying to enter the U.S., whether legally or illegally. But think about this. Do you ever see anyone trying to flee back into Mexico? That right there should tell us something, right? Okay, and our fourth and final catch-up interview was with Mike Martinez from the San Diego Police Department. This is the man who was involved in 3 deadly officer-involved shootings in his first 18 months on the job, and then had a 4th officer-involved shooting a couple years later. Man, that's horrendous. As we discussed, most police officers in the U.S. are never involved in a shooting throughout their entire career. I've talked to police officers who said they never pulled their weapon out except on the range. I don't know what their assignments were, but even in the small town of Bluefield, West Virginia, you still needed a weapon a lot of times. But that's what makes Mike's situation so unique. Because of Mike's honesty, his transparency, we heard what he and his family went through, even approaching the point of potentially taking his own life. Oh, man. But thankfully, through others who got involved in Mike's life, he received the guidance and help he needed, and he successfully overcame all those challenges. And then he became actively involved in the San Diego Police Department's wellness program. He's leading the charge there to help other law enforcement professionals through their traumatic experiences. And now the word is out about Mike. He's receiving invitations to speak to other agencies and groups about his experience so they can learn how to prepare and be ready to address those same issues in their ranks. During Mike's presentation at the Southern California Game Conference, when I walked through there, everyone in the auditorium wanted to hear about his experiences, what he went through, how he came out on the back end. And I'm talking about 1,000 cops were sitting in there, 1,000 law enforcement professionals in attendance. And when I walked through, you could have heard a pin drop while Mike was speaking. So it just shows the awareness, the interest in that topic, because with the violence we're seeing against law enforcement now, any of these professionals could be the next victim. Okay, I know I'm repeating what you heard from these heroes, but I am so proud of them and how they handled the traumatic events thrown at police officers daily and how they continue to stay in the fight to help others. In my opinion, it truly bears repeating here. Now, the 2 Johns and the 2 Mikes, if you thought about it, we had 2 Johns and 2 Mikes. They have come forward as true leaders in their agencies and in the field of law enforcement. I just can't say enough good things about these guys. And here's the thing. There are so many other law enforcement heroes out there doing the same or similar things to help others on a daily basis. So if you've read any of my social media posts or any of those, you'll see that my motto is back the blue, back the green, back the tan, back whatever color these heroes are wearing. They need the public support. They need your support. Please don't fall into that trap of supporting those idiots who spew the ridiculous rhetoric of defund the police or abolish the police. When I hear this type of bullshit, my first thought is, why would anyone say that? Are they criminals themselves? Are they trying to take out the only protection that law-abiding citizens have? Do you think people who live in high-crime neighborhoods and they can't afford to move anywhere else, do you think they want the police to go away? Again, out-freaking-rageous. Okay, let me take a deep breath. I'm pretty sure you folks know how I feel about law enforcement. So let me get off my soapbox now. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You know what? It's okay to have differences of opinion, but that doesn't mean we have to be enemies. We can still talk. It just blows my mind what's going on in the U.S. today. So if you'd like to learn more about today's conversations, you probably already know this. John Mattingly has his book out. It's called 12 Seconds in the Dark. And John Norris has his book, Hidden War, How Special Operations Game Wardens Are Reclaiming America's Wildlands from the Drug Cartels. You can find both of these books on Amazon, or you can go to gameofcrimespodcast.com, click on the book list in the top of the page, and you'll find their books listed there with a link. What about Mike Collazo and Mike Martinez? Well, both those guys are still on the job with their respective agencies, so they don't have their book out yet. I'm not saying that they're going to write one. I just have a feeling that maybe down the road we could all benefit from learning from them. So if you like today's episode, and I know you did, and you know I did, go to Apple or Spotify and click on the 5 stars, please. You can leave comments on Spotify as well, or you can send me comments at gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com. Also, head over to gameofcrimespodcast.com. That's where you'll find more information about the show, the episodes, the book list, and more. On social media, you can follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. You go to Game of Crimes Podcast. And on X, formerly Twitter, just type in Game of Crimes. That may not be around long, so up to you whether you go there or not. On Facebook, check out the Game of Crimes fan page run by our favorite mafia queen, Miss Sandy Salvato, the lady who rules with the iron fist but wears the velvet glove. I really think you guys will enjoy what you see there. That's the Game of Crimes fans on Facebook. I really appreciate you telling your friends about Game of Crimes. Tell them to come on over, download a show, and give us a listen. The best advertising and marketing in the podcast world is word of mouth. Believe me, I truly appreciate your support and efforts. After all, Game of Crimes, in my humble opinion, is the best weekly true crime podcast out there. You're going to hear from guests that you may not hear anywhere else. And as always, thank you guys. Thank you so much again for continuing to support the Game of Crimes. As I just said a while ago, we can have different ideas and different opinions, but that doesn't mean we can't continue to be friends. Finally, thanks for joining me once again to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes. See y'all next time.